sanitize and undo everything.
Yeah, because you know you had to put it back.
And then I waited till the last second. Oh, well. Okay. We are ready to rock. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Matt Willson Weekly Kickoff Show. I'm Mike Daggs. He's Gerald Smith. Week 1, Gerald, already in the books. SFL Convention Week, always a great way to get a season started. You were there, at least for the beginning. Then you ran off on us to go visit family, but
Yeah, I kind of bailed on everybody. But look, Friday was, extremely fun. Getting to see all the people that showed up. Got to meet, even interview some people during our show, which was good. Which was totally unscripted. No one had no idea that you were going to call them up, but it was good fun.
I didn't even have an idea I was going to call them up. I thought about it, but I thought, nah, too much work, too much logistics, trying to talk to everybody in advance. And I thought, you know what? What if we just don't talk to anybody in advance and we just start putting people on the spot? Hey, at least all of their comments, their reactions, everything that was authentic and genuine, because it was all ad-lib, much like we do this show every week. Really have no idea what we're going to yap about for a half hour.
I don't have any papers.
No, not anymore. So yeah, the convention was great. Had a lot of fun. Got to see a lot of people. We're already planning the next convention. The goal is to announce the convention location at some point during season 23, trying to get things buttoned up. Actually, I had some emails going back and forth with some venues today. So hopefully more information to come on the season 25 kickoff convention at some point over the next few weeks, couple of months at most. So we'll see what we can put together. A lot of great games too. We had the defending champs, Florida Storm, looking like the defending champs. They did really good. Saw the debut of some new teams to the SFL coming up from the minor league. We had Pittsburgh, Nashville, Albuquerque. We got the Aztecs and Louisiana game out of the way. Got it done with. Listen, it's a great game. I enjoy it, but I hate it at the same time, It was
wasn't the result we wanted, the result you wanted.
Yeah, I was totally fine with how it played out.
We had to throw you a bone because you brought so much confetti last season.
I left it
and then everything else. So maybe you should have brought the confetti. Maybe would have won.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to see season 24, or in the playoffs, we'll see. Definitely some surprises from some of the games in week 1. We had Nashville, one of the new teams, taking down the DC Dragons, a powerhouse. I mean, they've been a great team the past few seasons. Carolina, much to your surprise, defeats Vancouver.
Anytime, if y'all watch the show, I don't know. I don't know if it has anything bad to say.
Not bad.
It was mild bashing, right? Maybe, but Carolina loves to prove me wrong.
They do.
If they need a win, say, hey, talk crap about us in the weekly show, and they'll come through in the clutch.
That's it. Some more surprises. Denver struggled over the past few seasons. They scored the most points in the league in week 1, outscoring everybody else 34, if I remember correctly.
34 is correct.
Yeah, yep. Canton, one of the teams last season that looked like they were going to win it all, undefeated all the way through, ended up losing in the championship to Florida. They've already lost. So,
and if you do the math, they've actually lost 2 in a row now when they've won everything up until the championship game last season.
Absolutely.
So that's unheard of for them.
So the loss watch for Canton is already over. It's out of the way. And the Los Angeles Lycans, that was one of the big surprises for me, how well they did. We talked about it in the show, thinking about what are they going to be? Are they going to be good? Are they going to be, are they going to struggle? Trying to, think of the best way to word it, but they look good. They lost to Arizona, but only by 1 point. And they were in it all the way to the end. I'm not sure if you ended up catching that game, but
I sure did.
Yes, fantastic game all the way through. And LA had just as good a chance as they ever have against any team.
And Arizona had to score right near the end to be able to win that game, which proved that LA may have turned the corner, which also may prove trouble for us because we actually traveled to LA this week. We do that on Sunday, so
we'll see what happens there. So, hey, speaking of the upcoming schedule, let's get right into week 2 and break down our week 2 slate of games starting tonight in just about 23 minutes time, 8 p.m. Eastern. We kick off week 2 with Denver at Albuquerque. Myself and Gerald going to be on that call. Looking forward to getting this game started and actually kicking off almost every week going through the whole season. We'll be calling that first game. I'm glad that we were able to work the schedule out that way, and special thanks to Commissioner Cameron Irvine for allowing not only our show, but allowing our show to then transition into the kickoff game. So
yeah, and then the thing about it, I want to say, because like, hey, most of the weeks are going to be available. You're abandoning me again next month.
Wait a second.
Now,
wait a second.
I gotta say that out front, because you have a habit of doing that. Just planning vacations, like, Cheryl, you're on your own.
You're on your own.
And I'm just sit there and cry.
I
in the
will be
fetal
on
position.
vacation. I think it's week 11, but pretty sure you've got plans too. I don't want to hear it. Anyway, that's it for Friday. We're going to have the one game kicking off week 2 tonight. Got 4 games lined up for you tomorrow night, though. Houston at Vancouver with Tyler Falk, Alden Bleeker. And that's going to be at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also in the 6:30 block at 6:45, Pittsburgh at Canton. See if Pittsburgh can build on their loss from week 1, see what they can do against Canton, who also lost. Someone's going to get the win there. Ramos Lynn back in the booth along with John Warren. At 9 p.m., we've got Carolina at Fort Worth, Cameron Duty, Anthony Ellison on the call. And at 9:15, Lexington at Queen City with Ethan Muslin and Rochelle Colston. That's your Saturday block. On Sunday, DC at Florida, one of the games we're going to be breaking down here in just a little bit. That one, I got that one circled as a must-watch. Brandon Walters and Cameron Duty once again on that broadcast. Shout out to Cameron Duty for not only doing double duty, no pun intended, during the convention week on a couple of our pre-recorded games that we had broadcast, and ultimately simulcast. We had Cameron Duty on 2 games at the same time. It was great. I wish we could do that all the time.
I missed that. I wish I'd have saw it.
You shouldn't have gone visit family. You should have stayed with your SFL family. Lesson learned. Next convention will be nowhere near where your family is.
It was hot and humid. I should have stayed hanging out in the swimming pool in Texas.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You missed out. So, but that's going to be a fantastic game. And then at 6:45 p.m., Minnesota at Atlanta, another great one with Michael Churillo, who is able to call a few games for us here at the beginning of the season, along with Mark Lopez. And then at the 9 p.m. block, your Louisiana Revolution head to Los Angeles, like you said, take on the Lycans. Chris Curtis, Mike O'Neill on the call.
If we lose, Chris Curtis is not allowed to call any more of our games, because he was doing analysts in our other games. So if he's on it and we lose, it's his fault. He's the curse.
Not only is he allowed to call your games, he's also allowed to imitate your logo, which is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen any of those photos, ask. I'll send them to you. They're great. At 9:15, we got Charleston at Chicago, Andy Hamilton and Eric Vincent on the call. And then, of course, on Monday, coming back once again, the Monday Night Spectacular, 8:15 p.m. kickoff, Indianapolis at Baltimore with Cameron Irvine, Charles Doherty.
Yeah,
great slate of games.
Yeah, and I think the 2 games I'm interested in seeing this week is Minnesota versus Atlanta, and also the Indy versus Baltimore game for this week.
Yeah. All right, well, let's jump right into our breakdown of games. We'll start with Minnesota at Atlanta. Like you just said, you want to see that one. Minnesota, they lost in week 1. It was a close one against division rival Indianapolis, 26-20. It was one of the games that we picked, and you picked right. We'll talk about that later. Atlanta, on the other hand, they throttled Albuquerque in the Albuquerque-Adams debut. We'll see how they do here later on tonight. Atlanta is kind of difficult to predict. Historically, they've had very different season from one to the next.
Oh, yeah.
You know, after winning the championship back in season 14, they went on to have, a 500 record, and then they had a losing record. Then they went back to a winning record, and then back to losing, then back to 500, then back to winning, then back to losing, and then last season it was back to 500. It's a roller coaster, like a vicious roller coaster at that. So if history holds, then they're due for a winning season this time. But you just never know. Minnesota, they came off their best season in franchise history. They went 10-2 in the regular season. They won a playoff game, ultimately lost the second one. And Johnny Reno, their quarterback, has proven to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Number 3 in completions, number 2 in yards, number 3 in interceptions, number 2 in quarterback rating through season 22. So this is going to be a great one. I mean, Minnesota's got a great team. Atlanta looks like they might be back in the saddle again as well. So, let's talk about this game. We'll start with Minnesota.
Yeah, and Minnesota had a tough loss last week in overtime, as you just mentioned, right? And they were playing great in the first half last week, but they fell off in the second half. They were outscored 19-3 in the second half, which also includes overtime. Offense wasn't bad at all. Reno threw for 275 yards, 2 touchdowns, 70% completion on the day. and 203 of those went to Deezer Powell. So they found that connection somewhere between mid-season last season, and they're continuing that on this season.
Great performance, but the 2 picks.
Yeah, he threw the 2 interceptions, right? So, and that kind of hurt him a bit. And the run game was solid, getting 80 yards, on the ground combined. They just need to be offensively. They need to put a full 4 quarters together and continue what they started in the first half and just carry it over into the second half. Because if they just repeated what they had in the first half, I think the score is a lot different. I think they come away with that win last week.
Well, I think part of their difficulty was on defense. They struggled a little bit stopping the run. They allowed nearly 130 yards on the ground and a bunch through the air as well. So
yeah, and 3 touchdowns,
yeah.
250 in the air, 3 touchdowns, and 19 points allowed. As we mentioned, they just couldn't stop anybody, right? So, and that's in the second half.
Yeah.
It was too much for their defense to overcome, right? When their offense isn't scoring, their defense just can't overcome anything. The bright side, they rushed the quarterback really well with 3 sacks on the day, all by defensive tackle, the massive human being in Max Knight. So, but I do think they do. They're in a good spot. They're still a good team. Week 1 doesn't give at least me any kind of a pause or indication that they're going in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they played well. They just got to clean some stuff up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, like we already mentioned, getting into Atlanta, very impressive look in week 1. The offensively, they were extremely efficient. Talk about Atlanta.
Yeah, and Brian Dynasty was 10 for 12 for 173 yards. But you know what he had? 4 touchdowns and no picks on the day. When you can be that efficient, that's like over 80% passing he had right there.
Right.
Only 2 incompletions, right? So, look, and their free agent signee, Fox Highwind at wide receiver, had a great game. 126 of those 173 yards and 2 of those touchdowns went to him.
Great.
Now that he's back in Atlanta, he was there previously before, left, and now he's back with them.
Yep.
Look, and the ground game was good as well. They rushed for 128 yards by the running backs, BDG Hollywood. And we ain't going to call him running back, but he's a wide receiver, Siege Falco.
He ran the ball.
One team wins a championship with the wide receiver running the ball, and they're like, let's keep on doing it, I guess. I don't know. Hey, but look, it got them to a week 1 win.
Yeah, well, you know what they say, imitation is the best form of flattery or something to that effect. I don't know. Listen, I think it's how any major sports league runs, right? One team sees another team have success a certain way, and they want to try to see what they can do with that as well.
Oh, I wish I played Atlanta because, Louisiana's got major owners on Atlanta. Put on the schedule, Mr. Cameron, everybody.
Well,
because that's what we want. I've been fiending for some Atlanta bug juice for the last 2 seasons.
You've already got the signs and the shirts all
last
made
season, we didn't play them this season. I don't know schedule. We're coming after
the only
bugs.
Good bug is a dead bug, right?
That's facts.
That's what I've heard. Anyway.
That's facts.
So let's talk about their defense. Only allowed 271 yards of total offense last week. Pretty solid.
Yeah, and the run defense was great and limited their opponent to 2 yards per carry.
Yeah,
which is great. Look, they also pressured the quarterback as well with 3 sacks and forcing an interception as well. Only allowing 7 points all game. Defense looked really, really good after 1 week. Like I said, it's week 1, so we're going to see how it goes. But Atlanta looked really impressive all across the board to me.
All right, well, let's get into DC at Florida. Again, a game that I circled on my calendar as a much watch this weekend. One of the interesting things I thought about this game, DC at Florida. So DC's been around since the dawn of time. Florida's been around since the dawn of time. 26 combined seasons have been played between these two teams. 336 total games in the books for these two teams. 8 championships played between them. 6 championships won between the two teams. So guess how many times these teams have met in this 336 game history? 2. Only twice?
What?
How does that happen? 2 times. They've only played each other 2 times ever. Florida won both of those games. They were both in DC. This is the 3rd time that they've met. This will be DC's first trip down to Fort Lauderdale to take on the Florida Storm. Never even played them as Alaska, although there was a bit of a hiatus where I think most of the time they were the Alaska Storm. DC wasn't in business. Third time they're meeting, but this is going to be a great game. DC, they are coming off a loss to the rookie franchise Nashville. DC did get out in front early in that one, but then was shut out in the second half, and they lost 17-10. Florida, we called that game. Florida's doing Florida things. They took Chicago on last week, and Chicago actually did have the lead at the end of the first quarter, but then 17 unanswered points in the second quarter proved to just be the difference. Chicago never could bounce back from that and ended up going on losing the game. So a couple of powerhouse franchises going head-to-head in week 2. Talk about DC's offense.
Yeah, it was a tough game last week for DC. The offense, the passing offense struggled, right? So, and if tight end, you know how much I like Lauren Prococo. And I've always said DC has have a way of the offense runs through her.
It sure does.
And last week, it seemingly seemed if she didn't catch a pass, no one caught a pass. She accounted for 7 of the 10 completions that they had, and 133 of the 176 yards that they threw on the day. Quarterback Sebastian Synergy, along with those yards, threw 3 interceptions, no touchdowns to speak of at all from the quarterback position to any wide receiver. The run game was pretty good. They rushed for over 100 yards for the game. But when they needed the yards in the pass game, it just wasn't there. They wasn't making any kind of connection or anything like that. They have to clean up the passing game and possibly get more people involved, because if it's got to solely run through Lauren Prococo, we said it with, Tulsa last season. It was now Lexington. If they're trying to go, throw it to one person all the time, if they lock that down, and if they struggle, it's going to make them one-dimensional.
Now, we talked about Atlanta's defense and how well they did at just not allowing a lot of total yards. Arguably, DC, even better. They only allowed 179 yards of total offense.
Yeah, and they played extremely well. As sacking the quarterback 3 times, getting an interception. The offense put them in the toughest situations during the game, and that's not a recipe for success, right? So, and it was way too much for them to overcome when the offense isn't putting anything up. They have a chance due to their defense, in my opinion, right now, against the champs. They do have a chance if they can get their offense going a little bit and they repeat that performance they had last week against the champs. I think they have a shot.
Yeah, I would agree. We'll have to see how it ends up playing out. Let's talk about the defending champs, Florida Storm. Their offense hasn't skipped a beat since they won the championship, and they have to be talking in their locker room about how they have an opportunity not only to go for a three-peat here, but the second time a three-peat has been done in their franchise.
And it's crazy. It just shows you that they're still hungry. You think after winning a gazillion championships seemingly that they've done, they've won 5 of them, and they just continue to seem like they're just not skipping a beat at all.
They're going
whatsoever.
for that second three-peat.
And last week offensively, they had over 400 yards of offense last week with wide receiver Art Vandelay continuing to prove he is the ultimate X factor in the SFL with a combined 176 yards through catching passes and a limited running that he was doing. So look, if they can keep doing that and him being the X factor that he is, and I think he's turning into this Swiss Army knife. Who knows? We might even see him throw a darn pass before long. He can return kicks. Fun. Yeah. He's got a touchdown returning kicks. He's got a touchdown in the receiving game. And I'm sure he's got one on the ground too, running the ball. So he can do it all, right? And they are, in my opinion, the most efficient offensive team in the SFL.
Well, we talked about how DC's defense only allowed 179 yards of offense last week. Art Vandelay himself had 176, just 3 yards shy of what the DC defense allowed all last week. So I want to see how Art Vandelay does against that stout defense. So speaking of stout defenses, Florida's defense, they looked the best in the league last season, and they're starting off the same way again. Best unit in the SFL, maybe? Yeah,
that's my opinion. I do think they are the best combined unit in the SFL, and they proved it again last week as if they did, just like they did the previous 2 seasons. Even in week 1, they're doing. They allowed 38% completion from the opposing quarterback last week. That's almost unheard of. The only other thing we heard from was like maybe from Canton last season when they were on a historic run, and limited the people to points and stuff like that. And they are very stingy in the run game. They're second and third level defenders or elite across the board. They can play well in a passing game, and they play the run. I've said it multiple times. The defensive backs on Florida can play the run like as if they're linebackers and defensive linemen. They play really, really well at the line of scrimmage. So it's going to be tough to beat Florida at all, I think.
We'll see how that one plays out. Excited for it. Let's get into Houston at Vancouver. Another great matchup this week. 2 successful franchises. Houston finishing 8-4 in the regular season, 1-1 in the playoffs. Vancouver 7-5, also 1-1 in the playoffs. That marks the 9th straight season that they've had a playoff appearance. Very impressive. Great start to the season for Houston. They looked really good on Pittsburgh. They got out in front early, never looked back. I know you'll talk about their running game, I'm sure. So I won't even try to steal your thunder, but they looked really good. Vancouver played Carolina in the Hall of Fame game. It lived up to its name. It lived up to the hype. Very close battle, very defensive battle most of the way through. Not a lot of scoring, but a great ball game. Ultimately, to your surprise, Carolina got the win, and eventually you'll learn that if you keep talking smack about Carolina, they'll keep finding a way to win. So, hey, by all means. I know we're not breaking down a Carolina game, but next time we do, I'm sure they'll be happy when you talk crap and then they get the win. Vancouver, they're going to be looking to bounce back in their home opener this week, hosting Houston, but it's going to be a tough matchup for them. Let's talk about Houston's offense.
And like you said, I know you don't want to throw my thunder, but I said it last season. I will say it again. Houston has the best running back duo in the league.
Yeah.
Even though they lost GP Wells, what they bring in? They bring in
Lord
Shepard Vicarian, Lord Vicarian coming in there, and he had to couple with Josh Slepin. They didn't miss a beat whatsoever.
Yeah.
Both running backs had over 100 yards on the day. They dominated a lot of the scrimmage. That offensive line was just pushing people around, so they dominated offensively in the run game. Due to the running game being as good as it was, nobody even hardly noticed O.J. Bruin and the tough day he had in the passing game. He only completed 39% of his passes. They will have to try and get him in a rhythm. Yeah. I know he's new to the team, and get in with those, those Hall of Famers he's got. He's got Tiberius Bovine. He's got D.R. Sim, and he's got Mike St. Green, who's another good wide receiver as well. Maybe they need a little bit more chemistry and stuff like that. That way they're not leaning so heavy on the run game, right? And actually can enter that passing game to make them more of a lethal team on offense.
It's difficult to even have a single rusher go for over 100 yards. They did it with 2. And, no trickery with a wide receiver getting rushing yards. It was 2 running backs, 100 yards each. Plus, crazy. Defense, the defensive unit, they rendered their opponent last week to just 20 rushing yards for 1 yard per carry. That is insane.
It is insane. And they were able, along with that rush, they made them start running. They sacked the quarterback 3 times. Yeah. Linebacker Jason Peace had a great game last week with 8 tackles, 4 of them for tackles for losses, a forced fumble. And what does he do with a forced fumble? He also pick it up too, right? So the defense has played at a very high level last week, and that's similar to when they were doing really well last season, right? We saw them playing really, really good defense, just like they played last week. Now, them playing Vancouver and the struggle Vancouver had last week, this could be a tough, really, really tough game again for Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver, we'll see what they can do. I know, you talked about the consistency that they've shown throughout the league. I even mentioned it earlier on, 9 straight seasons of making the playoffs. I'm pretty sure they won their division, if not every season, almost every season in those 9. But the team didn't quite look the same as I think what you're used to. Yeah,
and I'm used to seeing Andy Hamilton kind of, have it all together at the start. For whatever reason, it just didn't mesh well together last week, right? It's not the type of, Vancouver type team I've come to know and love. Maybe I love him a little bit more only when Andy gives me $5 when I'm talking really good about him.
He did bribe you, yeah,
but
he did.
They were just bad offensively. Let's just say what it was. Throwing for only 89 yards with 2 picks, and the ground game was bad as well. They only got 86 yards on the ground, right? And they can't win games with that type of offensive output. So if you put that together, that's well under 100 yards. Yeah. I mean, well under 200 yards for them combined offensively. And that's not that type of offensive output that is going to win you the game. They need to get themselves in a rhythm so they don't have another performance like they do this week like they had last week.
If there was any bright spot, it was the defense, though. Talk about that Vancouver defense.
Yeah, and they pressured the quarterback very well. Look, and they didn't lose by big, or anything like that. So
1 score.
Right. So, and they got 3 sacks, and they forced an interception as well. The defense was only a victim because of, the offense's inadequacies and what they could not do.
Yep.
So, look, I'm not late last season. We've seen this same Vancouver team. Not much change has happened within them. Beat this Houston team in Week 12 last season. So, look, it could be. I mean, are we picking an upset right here, combined on paper later on? Because it's one of the games we're going to pick. I don't know. Andy can put it together. Him and the staff can put it together, and I think we'll find out.
We will find out. That game will be played tomorrow. So we have one game kicking off here tonight in just a few minutes. Time the Week 2 kickoff game. We've got the three-time SFLM champion Albuquerque Adams. They get to play their home opener tonight against a retooled Denver squad that's got Jeremy Vega back at the coaching helm and a new Western Division rivalry. So very excited to be able to call this one. Really looking forward to seeing Albuquerque Stadium and seeing what Denver can do. Can they repeat what they did last week? Obviously, Albuquerque doesn't want to repeat what they did last week. They want to get things going. They only scored one touchdown. The West overall looks like it's going to be a great division this season. Denver scored the most points in week 1, beating Queen City 34-10. Arizona got a win over division rival Los Angeles, but Los Angeles held their own. They looked really good too. Vancouver, they always seem to find a way to win, like we've talked about. They win their division all the time, and I know that they're planning on winning the West again.
Right.
And then we have newcomer Albuquerque, who obviously didn't perform well in week 1, but they know how to win. Did you hear me mention the 3-time SFLM champion? I mean, they know how to win football games. We'll see if they can put it together here in the Major League. Denver, they haven't had a winning season since season 16, back when they went 11-1, and then they won the championship. Could they get back there? And for Albuquerque, they're a new team to the SFL coming from the minors. They couldn't do much against Atlanta, but will they find their footing here? Let's talk about this game. Go ahead and break down Denver's offense.
So it was, for Denver, it was a full team effort win last week for Denver, right? The Denver pass game wasn't good, very good at all. Gene Struthers, he threw 3 picks, right? But the running game from Bailey O'Shaughnessy was really, really good. He had 113 yards, a touchdown, along with a defense led by my boy who come from Louisiana, safety Jeff Lynch. I love you, Jeff, who had 7 tackles, 3 pass defenses, and an interception as well. And it was able to get the ball back for their offense to allow them to be able to put up points. Right. So it's a classic case of, if one phase of your team is failing, the other phase has got to kind of pick you up, right? So, and that's exactly what happened last week with them and how they got the one, and they was able to put together a win. They scored 34 points doing it, and their defense did pretty well. They only gave up 10.
Yeah, for Albuquerque, you talk about how, with Denver, if one side struggling, the other side picks it up. Unfortunately for Albuquerque, that did not happen. Offense struggled, defense, can they pick it up? No, they struggled too.
And Cyrus Jive, he was sacked 3 times, threw a pick. The running game was not existent. They're averaging 2 yards a carry from their running backs, and you think with them having a wide receiver like Kay Marion come over in addition to the team, that they would get her, because she's such a game changer, that they would get her the ball. She had 1 catch last week.
Right.
1 catch for about 30 yards. Look, that 1 catch, she did get a good chunk of yardage, but you have to, try and get her the ball a little bit more, right? Because she can change the game and kind of take over a game in some ways. But defensively, they have to limit the chunk yardage plays. They allowed 83% completion, to their opponent last week, right? So they got a lot to clean up, and I know, but they are a new team to the majors. But that excuse is only going to pass for so long to your fans and your players.
Couple more weeks at most.
Right. So I mean, them being new and them, being in a situation, that's not an excuse for them doing it. They've won 3 championships, like you said, in the minors. They know how to win. They just got to make it come together.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, we'll see how that game plays out in just a couple of minutes when we get that one kicked off. Let's first go over our picks for the week. We'll recap our picks last week. Both of us starting off the season 4-1. We picked 5 games, and we each picked 4 of them correctly. And
I blame Carolina, because if Carolina would have fell flat on their face,
you'd be winning.
Like I asked them to.
Yeah,
it would be 5-0.
Yeah, well, some things weren't meant to be, I guess. Last week you picked Arizona, Vancouver, Indianapolis, Fort Worth, Houston. I picked Arizona, Carolina, Minnesota, Fort Worth, and Houston. Obviously, the Vancouver, Carolina, and the Indy, Minnesota games were the difference. We both have 1 loss, but we have 4 wins. It means we at least know a little something about what we're talking about.
Something.
So, all right, let's get into this week's picks. We've got Minnesota at Atlanta. Who do you got?
I'm going with Minnesota because I think last week, right, wasn't any indication of how they can play. And because of the inconsistencies with Atlanta, you don't know what you're getting from week to week, season to season. You don't know sometimes. I'm going with the more consistent team coming from last season, and they still played well last week. Minnesota is going into Atlanta, going into the Hive, and I think they come away with a win.
All right. Well, our first difference of the week, because I am going to go with Atlanta. Like I said, historically speaking, if you look at that roller coaster, we're in a peak season, baby. This is where Atlanta's going to come up. Boo Medium Rare Chisholm's going to be catching passes like you wouldn't believe. BDG Hollywood's going to be the old whirling dervish like he's been spinning around everything. Everybody in their mommy's going to be spinning around. Atlanta, they're going to take it to Minnesota, and I can pick against Minnesota this week because I don't have a Sasquatch staring at me, which was very intimidating last week. So
I didn't care.
yeah, I know. You like put your hand on his shoulder and like talk to him like, listen, son, you're gonna lose.
Oh, he resembles the Rougarou, which we're friends with, being from Louisiana. The Rougarou, so I'm like, hey, we're good. I got protection. I got the Rougarou in my back.
DC at Florida. Who you got?
I got Florida. There's no question. They're still on a roll. They're way too powerful, even though DC has been good. I just don't think they're Florida good right now.
If anybody can get the second three-peat in SFL history, it's Florida. I think they're going to take care of business this week against DC. And last but not least, Houston at Vancouver.
No, I will say it right here. Andy didn't give me $5 this week because he's not here. But I am picking Vancouver. I think Vancouver can win.
He paid it forward. He
paid in advance. He Venmo'd to me. Anyway, so Vancouver, I think, rebounds at home this week, right? Because even if you look at last season, they played a hot Houston team. It was a shootout, 38-31. Vancouver came away with the win, and I do think we see the Vancouver team that I'm used to seeing. And I think they, as you know, when they welcome Houston into their house, Vancouver wins it.
For me, I look at Houston, how they played last season, especially in the second half of the season. They played great. They came out in week one. They still looked great. Vancouver looked like they were a little rudderless at times. I picked against them last week, and it paid off. Sorry, Andy. Sorry, Mark. Sorry, Brett. Sorry, everybody on the Vancouver squad. Love you all. But Houston's going to get the win, much to my dismay, because, South Division, baby, I need Houston to lose. The start of the Houston game last week, I told them hey, hope you lose. And it's like, look at me like, well, that's kind of mean. What can I say? Hey, listen, our timer is hit 0. It's time for kickoff. We're going to get up into the booth and get week 2 rolling the right way by getting these games started. And how's it going to turn out? Well, as Matt Willson would say, there's only one way to find out, and that's on the field. We'll see you guys in just a few minutes at the stadium. Sweet. We'll get set up.